Hello chaps, and welcome back to another episode of DTH Reviews, and today we're doing our first DLC, I believe. It's the first game add-on that we've ever done, and it's an exciting one. It is Burial at Sea, Episode 1. So let's jump straight in. This kind of snuck up on me. They didn't do much advertising. I just kind of realised the other day that this is coming out.
So yeah, I think we were both pretty excited as soon as they announced it back in August, I think.
Yeah.
I think we both were like, okay, yeah, I'm in. Rapture, as we said in the Infinite review, Rapture was sort of our... It was a better realized place, and it was the one that we, of the two cities, Rapture and Columbia, Rapture was definitely the one that held a higher place in our hearts. Whether or not that's to nostalgia, I'm not sure, but yeah, so definitely I try not to go in with expectations to anything anymore, but I definitely went in with high hopes because I wanted to see Rapture alive for a really long time.
Yeah, I think you're right. I would go as far to saying that Rapture is my favourite in-game world or in-game setting that I've ever played. It holds a special place in my heart.
Yeah.
It's kind of... I got an Xbox 360 a little late, so it's kind of one of the first games I jumped into that really blew me away. So Rapture's always... It would be in my heart forever. So yeah, I was very excited to hear that we're finally going to see it alive.
So I was a little disappointed just with how they made it feel alive. It didn't, I don't know what it is, but it didn't quite feel as full of energy as Columbia did. Like that first half hour where you walk around in Columbia, I feel like that felt a lot more alive. Maybe it's because there was more people, maybe you could just see farther, maybe it was because the buildings moved around on the air balloons. I don't know what it was, but
it did feel quite stagnant after exploring Columbia.
Yeah, and the sort of opening half hour of the Burial at Sea, you are exploring with no combat and you're just wandering around, and it was a little rigid, I felt, which was a little disappointing.
I agree.
But it was still really nice to see, and it was actually really weird to see it all, because we've only ever seen it like 2 or 3 days later after everything explodes, basically. And it was really weird seeing everything, how, it was like, it's this thing that you've wondered about for so many years, and then you see it and you're like, oh, this is kind of weird, seeing this place that is actually alive, even though you've only ever seen it like very, very dead and messed up. So
I know what you mean. They when you first jump into it and you're in this kind of market area where you can just kind of wander around shops, it was very, very static. There weren't really people moving around. They were kind of just lurching over banisters and having mild chit-chat with each other. So I did like it. I really did like it. It was just nice. It just felt right to be walking around in Rapture again and be able to look out these windows and just see they've done a good job of updating the technology on this aquatic life where you can look out the windows and the ocean seems much more alive than it did back in 2007. Got it right this time. Yes, there's a couple of things that due to the update in technology that were a little bit better, but I think you're right. There weren't... I think maybe because it was a DLC, they didn't put as much time into making it feel as vibrant and active. Everyone was kind of just standing around, but it was nice. It felt more like a fan service than a fully playable section because it transitions.
Yeah, and that's, I think, a continuing theme for like the whole DLC is that. I mean, I think a lot of DLC is like always really fan servicey because it's usually the fans that buy it, but this is like extreme hardcore fan service because, I mean, the fans are the ones that have said, let's go back to Rapture, and it's definitely something that sort of sticks through the whole DLC, I think.
They do a good job of implementing a lot of new backstory to the characters. You kind of jump in a time in Bioshock where Andrew Ryan's just about to go off the rails and he's getting a bit power hungry, and the little sister just trying to... I'm not going to go too far into it, but...
Yeah, you sort of like the discovery is like you're learning the history of things to come. Thank you, Terminator 2. Right, because I mean, you know everything that has happened from sort of where you're about, from like 1958 onwards, but you don't know like the history of Sander Cohen and Dr. Suchong, and yeah, I thought that stuff was really interesting, seeing, them sort of their lead up to Ryan losing it, and doing everything that he does.
And it was kind of nice to hear about what happened to Rapture through the words of the citizens and the AI, instead of having to pick up these audio diaries, which are still in it, which provide even more backstory. But it was nice to just kind of walk around and hear what's going on from alive people than just some audio discs on the floor. And quite quickly in the DLC, it transitions into combat field, I guess you could call them dead areas, kind of very reminiscent of the original Bioshock, where you quickly transition into settings where there's no one around and it's just empty areas full of splicers, which I was kind of...
early onset splicers.
Yeah, I was quite disappointed about how quickly you left the living, breathing Rapture and kind of deteriorated into the slums. And it didn't go back to... I was going to say it went back to basics, but they kind of did this merging the Bioshock gameplay with the Infinite gameplay. And the combat plays differently, we'll talk about in a second, but I was a bit disappointed about how little of Rapture you get to see in its prime. We've got another episode or chapter, whatever you want to call it, of the DLC coming up, so I can't really summarise the whole thing yet. We might get to see more of it, I hope we do, and I presume we do, but I was a little bit disappointed about how little of Rapture you get to see alive and, packed full of people in this DLC.
But I think they did some good... Well, maybe not. I don't know. Yeah, I think they did some decent stuff with the gameplay. They sort of do a few interesting mergers of Bioshock 1 gameplay and Infinite gameplay. Like having the weapon wheel back. It's sort of a little thing, but Infinite you could only carry 2 weapons, and it was sort of nice to have all these weapons back. You can just select any of the weapons that you wanted. But mainly, I noticed the level design in this chapter. It was a lot more reminiscent of Bioshock 1, where they, it's all still linear, but the areas are very open and there's lots of stuff to explore, and Infinite certainly had that, but the levels in Infinite felt really linear with these sort of small little areas that you could go to. But this, it felt like Bioshock 1 again, where there are these big areas with doors leading off in different directions that don't really take you anywhere, but they're there for exploration, and I like that quite a bit, that they sort of opened it up a bit.
There was a lot to explore. Like, I was wandering around a section and I was just about to go back to the main objective, and I realised that I hadn't checked out this one quite bland looking door, and then I walked through it and it led me onto this whole completely optional section, which lasted me a good 20 minutes. So I think the game definitely, the DLC definitely has the capability of being an hour and a half long. But if you really work hard and do a good job of exploring, I played for a good, maybe even a bit over 3 hours. That might be pushing it a bit, but I know people have complained about the length, but if you put the effort in, you can get a solid amount of playtime for a DLC.
Yeah, I think if you play it the way a Bioshock game should be played, sort of slowly, drinking it all in, exploring, it's not super long still. Like, we both spent maybe 3 hours, and we were really... I really took my time going through it all.
Yeah, me too.
Because I knew it was short. We should say the story is good, but it's hard to talk about a Bioshock story when you've only sort of played half of it.
Yes.
And it's also hard to talk about a Bioshock story without spoiling it, and we're not going to do that. So I think it's an interesting story, and they definitely play with some of the aspects of... Or they play with some of the sci-fi aspects that were pretty heavily present in Bioshock Infinite in some interesting ways, I felt like.
Yeah.
And it ends pretty solid, and that's about it.
I feel the combat felt quite different, but in a good way. It felt much more tough. I felt I died a lot quicker. I died a considerable amount of times, but I was quite surprised, but then I ended up really enjoying how difficult it was. Well, it wasn't, if you managed your plasmids and your weapons well, it wasn't difficult, but you couldn't run in like an Infinite and smash people in the face and shoot people as easy. You had to be a bit more careful. Yeah,
I started playing on hard because I felt Infinite was best at hard because it was really easy on normal, and I thought it would just be the same going in, and I had to switch it back down to normal because there was almost no ammo the whole time. I was running out of ammo constantly.
Yeah, me too.
And it definitely felt harder, and you definitely had to manage all your weapons and plasmids a lot more, so which is sort of more reminiscent of the first Bioshock. There were a lot less resources. So yeah, I agree. That was a nice little touch.
Yeah, I actually found myself using the vending machines to buy ammo and Eve quite frequently, which I don't remember doing very often in Infinite. One thing I wasn't, you mentioned earlier, they blended the original Bioshock with Infinite, and Personally, I wasn't a big fan of the sky rails and the rifts that they put in it, because to me, it kind of, in the end, it started to feel
felt,
like
kind of out of place.
Yeah, it started to feel like Infinite, but with a Rapture skin on, which I was kind of hoping for a real send back to BioShock, which it was, obviously, because it's in Rapture and it's Rapture. But I still don't know how I felt about it. When it's not in it for long, you get to like kind of the last quarter of the game, and then the sky rails. I'm still not sure how I felt about it. I don't.
It made sense in Infinite, the sky rails and the tears, especially the skylines, because it was so open, and you were in the sky, and it made sense to sort of move around really quickly. But it doesn't. I don't think it quite makes sense and works and feels sort of out of place in this.
I agree, yeah.
And yeah, as soon as they gave you the sky hook and there were hooks, I was like, oh, that's kind of weird.
And I really didn't feel like I needed to use it at all.
Yeah, that was a little weird and a little out of place, but that's okay. Whatever.
Yeah.
Should we wrap it up here?
Yeah, I think we've covered most of the bases. Overall, I really like it. I think it was really nice of them to go back and to give the fans kind of a tribute to BioShock. I mean, they didn't have to do this, and they gave it to us, and it was really good. I think obviously they made design choices where they still had to make it feel like Infinite, and they can't design every game for people like me who think BioShock is the best game ever. So I went in hoping for BioShock, and what I got was Infinite with a BioShock theme, which is it was good. I'm a fanboy of the original, so I was hoping for more BioShock, but overall, I know what they were trying to do, and I think they did a pretty good job of it, and I'm looking forward to the second part.
Star rating, go.
I'm going to give it a 4 stars. I really enjoyed it. It's, as I said, I've summed it up. Rapture, it's awesome. The shooting is different. It doesn't feel exactly like Infinite. They do a weird blend, which I'm still not sure on, but yeah, it's solid. It's really solid. It's interesting ending, and can't wait for the second part.
Yep, I agree. I think 4 is right where it should be. It's not the longest piece of DLC, especially if you don't have the season pass. For $15 per episode, getting an hour and a half to 3 hours for $15 isn't great. But if you are a fan of BioShock and BioShock Infinite, you should probably play it because it's made for you.